Hello, everyone. Thanks for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with
Francesco Nepitello.
And today we're going to talk about the One Ring art role-playing game, second edition by Free League Publishing. Congratulations on the successful Kickstarter and having this printed and being sent to fans and backers all around the world right now. So last time we talked, it was still in the early Kickstarter stages with this book and the other items with it, and we were still trying to talk about like what's going to be in there, what's not going to be out. And I have to say right now, this is a very beautiful book. It actually reminds me of another book that Free League publishes that I love a lot, which is Vaesen. And it's interesting, like the way it feels, and like there's role-playing books have a certain style and feel to them. They have like glossy covers and pages, but this feels like one of those like old books you would like find in a library. You know, it's hard to describe it unless you've been into libraries a lot, like I have growing up. But this has a very like old school book feel to it.
Analogic typography instead of something that reminds of digital in some ways. I think it could be a good comparison. Glossy paper versus matte paper, and something that is rough at the touch versus something that is very slick, and so on. Also, it's sensibly lighter if you think compared to most glossy paper books, where sometimes, I mean, normally it's good to have a good, heavy and hefty book, but sometimes some of them feel too heavy. Like, I don't know, there's something in the paper and it's not really the thickness, it's probably just the composition. And in this case, it's not light at all, but it's the right feel, the right weight for me. And yeah, it's very close to what Vaesen was for Free League. In fact, it was like that they sold me the materials and the way they were going to say. They said, we're going to do it like Vaesen. And since I had it, okay, that's totally fine for me. Good idea.
Now, I noticed the art styles, maybe not. I mean, Vaesen has a very distinct art style, and the One Ring style is also, in a way, like design-wise similar, but the art's very different. When it comes to the art of this book, did you have a lot of say in it? Was there a direction you wanted to see this book look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we were in the early stages of discussion about how we would have liked to see the game come out at the end of the production process, we were brainstorming ideas, and Thomas and Martin from Free League and I and Christian Granat, the art director, were very much on the same line, on the same page, because we wanted something that looked as natural as possible. The comparison were twofold. One was like a notebook, something that people scribbled on it. So the instead of having, for example, graphic elements that looked perfect and crisp and so on, we wanted something that could have looked like something that was done quickly, something that was part of a handwritten book. And the other comparison that was done, I think it was a very good one, was comparing the look of that to the final, the credits pages, the credit sequences at the end of the Lord of the Rings movies. I don't know if you remember that at the end of the movies by Peter Jackson of the Lord of the Rings, they put these graphics that were pencil sketches by Alan Lee and John Howe that were put there together with the credits, and that gave a very natural feel to the final sequences of the movies. And I think they were looking exactly for that, some creamy color and the idea of something that was not industrial but more arts and crafts.
So I'm looking at the book now, and I can already see there's a big difference in rule style compared to the first edition one. I remember, not to knock the old edition, but I know my players were more comfortable playing with the Middle Earth 5e version because the rule system was a little difficult for them to understand. But I noticed for the second edition, incorporating, I assuming them using your Zero engine that you guys created, it seems like the rules seems much more simplified. Was that something you were hoping for in creating this book?
Yeah, the rules for Mutant Year Zero, the system, the house system by Free League, I have nothing to do with that. That's a creation by Thomas and from Free League and the guys at Free League, and they use it in a very clever way, I think, in their games because they adapt it to every different title. Basically, also as if they were designing it for that game world, instead of being a generic system that is applied forcefully to something. So, for example, the year zero system for Twilight 2000 is very different from the one used in Bison. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that was simply something that attracted me to Free League because I liked their games and I liked their philosophy for game design, where less is more. Basically, the idea that if you have a functional framework of rules that you can apply to do things without too many clutter, too many excessive fiddliness, it's better because the gameplay is going to profit from it because you will think less about exactly how to put it in place. The rules for the One Ring in first edition, I don't regret anything from the edition of the game at the time because I like very much a lot of things that were in there. But the game also grew in the making and also as publications came out eventually, and we never had the chance to just go back and give a good look to everything we had and say, okay, we can get rid of this or rid of that because it's not really used in the game, or it actually poses a hurdle for new players because it makes the game a little too fiddly. So we did that with second edition. We took this chance. Since we were there, and that was a new beginning, a rebooting of the game system. We said, what are we going to keep? What am I going to keep of the old system? What I'm going to throw away? The good thing is that it wasn't that difficult because it was not so difficult to see immediately what was excessively complicated and what was making problems for the players. I'm sure that now the game is getting in the hands of the players. There will be some of the first edition players that will regret some of the changes, that they will feel like we threw away too much. But I'm fairly sure and I'm pretty confident to say that try the game first, try the new edition first, and you will see why we threw away some things, even if they feel like they were making sense in first edition. Because many of the things that made sense, actually, you were making them make sense. You were adapting your gameplay to those excessive complications. So I think that what we kept is very much the essence of what in first edition anyway.
What rules did you keep from the first edition that you were happy to translate over to this new edition?
Oh, well, there was something that was only hinted at in first edition that we didn't make use extensively, and that was a clever idea. And it was, since the game system in the One Ring uses a D12, one single D12 and the number of D6s. The feed die, the D12, is the heart of the game system because you roll it all the time. You roll it always. Whenever you take an action or you resist something, you roll the D12 plus a number of D6s based on your skill or your proficiency in something. So sometimes the rules said, or some abilities allowed you to roll the D12 twice and keep the best result. And that's something that today is extremely familiar to everyone for the rules of advantage in 5e and in D&D. But it was in the One Ring. Some legends say that someone was inspired by that in the One Ring. I'm not sure I believe that. But in any case, we realized that was really a simple way and a very effective way to give an advantage to players. So we amplified that rule, and basically the rolling the D12 twice and keep the best result changed one thing that we called a favorite role in the old game that was using a different mechanic, a more complicated one. So now we have a more extensive use of favorite roles in the game that in the end is like a puzzle piece that fell in the right place because it took the place of a more complicated rule and used something that was already being received very well by the players.
So now that this book is published, is there anything? What are your like favorite parts about it? Like, were there anything in it that you were like very happy that you were to include? I know before you were still trying to work with your team about what can be in this book. Was there anything like, yes, we got this in there?
Well, yes. One of the things that one of the lessons I took from game design in Free League is the landmarks concept that we have now in the One Ring core, and we will feature also in future supplements. And this comes from the adventure sites concept in Forbidden Lands by Free League. Basically, Forbidden Land is a sort of an old school type of game made in the Free League way. It's not simply an OSR type of game. It's not a retro clone. It's a completely new game, but designed as if we were back in the 80s, playing hex crawl games and dungeon crawls. In that game, there's this concept where to allow you to play a sandbox, instead of having adventures that are divided, in chapters, part 1, part 2, and so on, and that in many ways pilot railroad players along a more or less predetermined route. Adventure sites are self-contained places. In Forbidden Lands, they can be villages, castles, and dungeons. And of course, they fit very well the background in that game where you have a big land that was inaccessible until sometime recently, and now it's open for adventure. Now, this concept resounded very, very appropriately for the new background in the game that is the land of Eriador. We moved the focus of the game from Wilderland, where it was more about the resurgence of the folk of Wilderland after the death of the Dragon Smog. We moved the background for about 20 years more in the future, and we moved west into the region that is very well known to people having read the Lord of the Rings, because it's where the Shire is and so on, but is a vastly abandoned land, a barren land, because it was once a rich kingdom, but that got destroyed centuries ago. That was very appropriate for the idea of isolated places that can be explored by a fellowship of adventurers, instead of being tied to some sort of overarching plot. So this was something that I said, I think we can adopt this into the way I like to play the One Ring. And this is like making self-contained things that eventually are tied together, but they are tied because of the choices of the players, rather because I, as the lore master, had some story in mind. And this is what we're embracing with also the supplements by exploring more of the land of Eriador with more landmarks. So that's something I was really happy to give my interpretation of the adventure site concept and place it into Middle-earth and make it feel right for Middle-earth.
So besides the core rulebook, you also have the starter set, you have the GM screen, and a bunch of other items with it. If you don't mind sharing, what were some of the challenges you had, and how did you defeat them?
The challenges. One of the challenges was making a starter set that doesn't feel useless to veteran players, because a lot of publishers feel the necessity of doing it because all games, especially role-playing games, have high entry level and difficulty curve. They're difficult to get into, especially for new players. So everyone feels the need to make a starter set that will bring new players in. But when you do this, most of the times you just do something that is a washed down version of the core, something that people that have the core game really don't feel they need. So they maybe buy it anyway because they're completists, but yeah, they rue it sometimes, some way, because they say, oh, okay, I have this. So that was the challenge. We said, what can we do to avoid making the starter set like a sort of an introductory adventure, something that, yeah, people will probably use with their nephews once and then put it on the shelf. And so we decided to make something completely different. And the completely different thing is that the starter set is the only place where we do a thorough exploration of the Shire, of the Hobbits. The Shire, we never got into the Shire before in first edition for several reasons. One of them being the fact that you have a lot of information in the Lord of the Rings, especially in the opening prologue. You don't need a supplement on the Shire because there's so much in the actual novel for you to just use if you want to go there. And also the Shire is probably on the opposite spectrum of an adventurous place, because it's what most resembles like an everyday place out of a modern world. So but we know that, of course, Tolkien fans have a soft spot for that and always want to know more, even if you already have a lot of information. So what we said was, okay, how can we do this interesting? And we made I think, what is a fantastic supplement on the Shire, written in a way that everyone, I think, will love, because James, who wrote it, is very much embodies the spirit of Hobbits so well that it transpires from his writing, from the writing of his Shire source book that is contained there so well that you just feel there. And we made we put a lot of effort in making a very comprehensive map of the Shire, for example. I am pretty sure that what we created with the help of Francesco Mattioli, that is a cartographer that is quite famous for his work on the Lone Wolf game books, the recreation of the world of Magnamund, I think we have created the most complete and comprehensive map of the Shire ever made. I never found any map anywhere that is even comes even close to the map that is in the starter set as far as details. We also made a lot of effort not to add too much to what is totally canonical. We had to do some because Tolkien wasn't just drew a map of part of the Shire, not all of it. So we don't have a full map by the author. But I think that it's something that the fans will really love. And we made a small campaign that is based on Hobbit characters. And again, it's something that I feel it's very much an added value, is that the characters that you use in the game, the pre-generated characters you find in the starter set, they are all historical hobbits, famous hobbits from the books. So, and they are tied together in a way that if you have adventures with them, they're going to make sense with the first chapter of the Lord of the Rings, with some of the things that Bilbo says about, with some of the interventions of during his birthday party in the opening chapters of the Lord of the Rings. If you play the game and then you read again the starting chapters of the Lord of the Rings, you will feel like the characters you played, took a new life, have an expanded chapter about their lives that you only know about and nobody else.
So let's talk about the future of the One Ring. I know personally myself, I am curious because looking at how different companies have worked on the property before, from like the days of Ice to Cubicle 7, how they produced books that came out for it, and it's interesting the directions that they made. And I can't help but to be curious, what's Free League's plans exactly? Are they thinking about like source books based on locations, or do you think about maybe just do adventures? Like can you share with us like any plans that they maybe everyone's brewing over there?
there's not much I can say for the moment because it's still. I'm sure that Free League wants to make some official announcements at some point about the future of the line. I can only give you some pointers, and it's not difficult to figure out because if you look at how the company approaches expansions for older game lines, you will see that they're not into the idea of making too many supplements in a short period of time. They like to take their time to do things well. For example, for Forbidden Lands so far, they published a relatively small number of things if you think of other companies, but there's hundreds of playtime in there because they already published 2 full campaigns. There's a new one coming out and a couple of books of separated adventures. So the idea is basically that, is to make intense and really solid supplements coming out for the game that might take more time to do compared to the pace of other companies that publish stuff. But when you get them, you will have so much to play out of them that and you're going to be able to wait for the next. So in any way, what it is known, and I'm not telling, I'm not giving out any secrets, is that we are finishing Ruins of the Lost Realm, the supplement that was promised during the Kickstarter, that is going into more detail about the land of Eriador, with a focus on the city of Tharbad. And so that will be a new thing for most, even for veteran role players that used to play the One Ring First Edition, because it's going to be a different type of supplement based compared to the old ones, because there's a number of landmarks as the one presented in the core book from different areas in Eriador, but that also as you do with adventure sites with Forbidden Lands, you can place where you want, basically. Some of them are historical ones, so they have a specific location on the map, but some others can be arranged based on your campaign. But then we also have what can be described as campaign guidelines. So there's a sort of there are a couple of chapters. One is a more focused chapter on the city of Tarbad, and another one is a chapter based on what's going on and what's going to happen in the land of Eriador in the next years and even decades, based on the gameplay, especially based on the gameplay and what the players do. So there is it's very close well, many games do this, but just to make an example of things that come to my mind are like fronts in games like Powered by the Apocalypse, where you have things that in some ways evolve based on what the players are doing. So things that may happen but may not happen because the players probably prevented it by doing something else. So it's a sort of a reactive plot, not a meta plot like in other games where the history and future history is already written. So that's one thing. Then we also, well, it's not a surprise that we're working on Moria, and and we're looking into the many ways of making that really exceptional. And I'm sure that people will appreciate that to make it, because it's something that is so long in the making, and especially everyone has been thinking about that since day one, to see how Moria would be. And that's about what I can say, because some of the things will also depend on players' feedback once the game is out. So players can tell us what they want to see. We're always listening. And but yeah, I don't want to step on the feet of the publisher and their own ideas on how to proceed.
well, thank you for sharing that. That's actually really exciting, especially about Moria. So a question about when it comes to inspiration from other sources. Now, besides, of course, the books, there's been video games like Shadow of Mordor that was very popular for some time, and then there's the new Lord of the Rings TV show that's coming out very shortly from Amazon. Is Free League looking into that for possible inspiration for other source books or ideas? Or are they just hoping to stick just to the books for now? Or
Well, we cannot deny that. Of course, we're always we're watching very closely what's going on out there, especially with the Amazon series. We were all glued to the screen watching the that short, excessively short title reveal, "The Rings of Power," and the making of. Last night I was listening to a streaming radio program that we have here, where all sorts of theories have been thrown out there, for all the symbolism of the molten metal. You've seen, I guess, the title reveal, and the water that comes on it. Is that a reference to Numenor being, engulfed in water, and so on? So yeah, it's very interesting to engage in this sort of thinking, what's going on, what will happen. I'm very happy to say that the Rings of Power TV show at least seems to share something with what I really like in the Lord of the Rings, and is the depth of the historical of history that you have in Middle Earth. It's not simply dealing with. I mean, the Lord of the Rings deals with 1 year in the whole history of Middle Earth, and the Hobbit too. So that's why, for example, with the One Ring, we decided to make a game that is about the span of time that comes from the Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings, that is 70 years, because we really have this idea that the Lord of the Rings is about the passage of time and a future, but also the past. So of course, watching what the Rings of Power is pointing to makes us think a lot about what can we do eventually to make to put into the game even more references to the Second Age and things that happened in previous ages of the world. So for licensing limitations, we cannot even think of doing something like a Silmarillion role-playing game, or something that is connected to the Amazon TV show and stuff like that. But nothing prevents us to continue doing what we do. And one thing that we like to do is exactly this: is to allow the game to be able to look to the past for inspiration. So, for example, looking for lost artifacts and looking into the I don't know, for example, what happened to the Seven Rings of the Dwarves. We know it's been said they've been destroyed, but it seems that the Thrain had won. So yeah, a lot of gray areas we can explore that can be also cleverly used as a sort of a tie-in to the Rings of Power TV show.
One thing that players in the past have always tried to grapple with is the lack of creatures in Lord of the Rings. There's in the older game systems, there's been discussion about, like, okay, if you add too many new creatures, that takes away the spirit away from Lord of the Rings. But then people say, well, you can't just fight orcs all the time. If I may ask, what is Free League thinking about when it comes to the bestiary? Are you sticking straight to the books, or are you thinking about being more creative and go beyond that? What are your thoughts? And again, you don't have, if it's something that Free League has to talk about.
No, it's of course a very delicate question, because the heart of many fantasy role-playing games lies exactly in the variety of opponents, because they're basically based about fighting monsters. And so D&D has always been, for example, about having multiple monster manuals, Monster Manual 1 and 2 and so on, because you need hundreds of those. You don't really need hundreds, but you like to have the option of surprising your players with something that is completely different from what they faced before. And that's exactly in opposition to the Lord of the Rings, apparently, because you have a finite number of creatures that have been described in the stories. One way that we took was, for example, in the core. It was a stretch goal actually in the Kickstarter, but we embraced the idea of incorporating it into the core. It is the fact that we put the nameless things creation rules in the core. And this allows the lore master to create a limitless number of critters that tie to that represent creatures like the Watcher in the water, in the pool outside of the Moria Gate, the Western Moria Gate, or even possibly Shelob, or even some corrupted tree and so on. So also there are sentences by Gandalf and other characters that reference that there are older things that Sauron that knows at the roots of the world or something like that. So it's sort of a Lovecraftian reference to the existence of monsters that are even impossible to be described and that have no name. So that's why we call those rules the nameless things rules. So that adds, of course, a level of things that relies a lot on the creativity of the lore master to make them feel like they're part. They do belong to Middle Earth. But yes, I know it's a very fine thread to find path to follow, because, for example, considering what we did with first edition, there were a couple of instances where I regret a little bit not having cut out some creatures because they don't really feel like part of the game. For example, I remember basilisks. It's something that we put into the Heart of the Wild, and it's something that, I don't know, feels too much like part of the Middle Ages and too much like from a different type of game. In general, what we try to do is to make to refer to actual folklore and legends, so that we can create something that feels like it belongs. And of course, especially if it is some folklore from the British Isles, so things that that Tolkien himself might have done when he was inventing his own creatures. If you think of the Barrow Wight, of course, is I mean, of course, Tolkien came out with something like that because we have barrows in England. You have many of those on the hills and so on. So it's easy to just think about a creature that lives inside the barrow. And so we're trying to do the same thing, thinking about creatures living in swamps and marshes and lochs and stuff like that.
So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you're working on outside of the One Ring that you want to share or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, I'm working on a lot of different things because since a couple of years, me and Marco Maggi, my co-designer, we have been working on a semi-exclusivity deal with Simon, called Mini or Not, the company doing Zombicide and other board games. So we are putting together, we're developing their narrative and storytelling department, mainly dealing with role-playing games, but not only, but also with narrative games. The first thing that you will see, well, there's something already out because we designed the Zombicide role-playing game called Zombicide Chronicles. And also there's a game called Trudvang Legends that will come out, that it has been developed by the team. And so we're working on several role-playing game projects and several board games that share one thing in common, and that they are all totally thematic games. So either heavily thematic board games or role-playing games. And that has been what we've been doing mainly for the last couple of years, and we will be doing for a while. The only drawback is that the schedule of the company is so far into the future that I can't say anything about any of the projects for the moment, but at least one will be revealed very, very shortly, probably a couple of weeks or so.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about the One Ring RPG. Congratulations. And I can't wait to play this. And to our viewers out there, stay safe. If you
Thank you to you too.
And yeah, everyone take care. Have a great day, everyone.